What's up, folks? Welcome to another episode of Smoke World. I'm your host, Stone. So go grab that stick, go grab a glass, whatever you're drinking. Let's sit back and have a conversation. You can follow me on Instagram at SmokeWorld50. And I tell you this every time, folks. Send those emails to SmokeWorld50@gmail.com. Today, I am blessed to have the man behind the scenes, a guy you may see doing this type of job on TV in all of the movies, but he is the real deal. Tom Gersbeck, EOD, aka Bomb Tech, is in the building. What's up, Tom? How you doing, brother?
Hey, good to be on here with you, Kev.
So what's happening, man? You know, a lot of folks don't understand what EOD stands for, which is Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit, but you know, we kind of keep it simple for the audience, for those who may not know, aka Bomb Tech. So, you know, I had the pleasure of meeting you some years ago, working with the Federal Air Marshals, and you were our instructor. You actually did an excellent job. You probably gave us more information than we really wanted to know, but I want to kind of get a little idea how you even get started with this. Like, where you from? Give us a little idea. You know, where did you grow up at?
Well, I was born and raised on Long Island in New York, and then graduated from Brentwood High School, which, if you have any folks from Long Island on here, they'll probably get a good laugh, because it's not exactly an institution of higher learning. It's more, it's not a good school, I guess, put it that way. So graduated from there, and then fumbled around, worked in factories and that kind of stuff for a couple of years, and just said, man, I really need to, do something. I have to get on the ball. So when I was 19, I joined the Marine Corps. My whole family's all former Marines, or now a couple retired. So I said, well, if I'm going to go in the military, I might as well do that. So I went in, and then in the Marine Corps, you can't enlist for EOD. I didn't know what it was anyway, so it wouldn't matter. I think I was in about 5 years before I even heard of EOD. And but in the Marine Corps, you have to lat move. You have to be a minimum of a sergeant, and the intent is they want you to know your way around the Marine Corps, and they're looking for folks who are more likely to stick around, and because there's a lot of training involved. So when you get folks, you don't want to lose them a couple years later. So I was in 6 years when I lat moved to EOD, and then stayed in that right until I retired.
Oh, wow. Well, again, thank you for your service, sir. We appreciate you on that end.
Absolutely. And, the EOD thing, what you said before, it's kind of funny because I retired in 2001, and when I retired, pre-9/11, about 5 months later is when 9/11 happened, nobody had an idea what an IED was, EOD, all of the terms that you hear now commonly on the news. Nobody knew what they meant. And then after 9/11, you couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting 32 experts. I was pretty funny.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. So actually, some of the folks may be listening may not be familiar with those terms you just spelled out. So maybe you can explain to them exactly what that is. The IEDs.
Well, an IED is your improvised explosive device, and they actually had to come out with a lexicon, Kev. And the initial one didn't even hit till around 2004, I think. But they had to come out with a lexicon to standardize a lot of this, because if you have a vehicle, then you have a vehicle-borne IED. They tend to be real big. But then people started making up their own acronyms. So then it was, there's someone wired up a house, so now it's a house-borne IED. Well, unless it's a mobile home, man, it's not born, it's not going anywhere. So you just call that an IED in a house. And then, you got a suicide IED, which, if you recall, a lot of the training we did focused on that. And that's why I was a big advocate, is you kill the suicide fella, and then now you just have an IED that happens to be strapped to a person. But folks started coming up with donkey-borne IEDs because it was on a donkey, so that they finally standardized a lot of that lexicon, trying to keep it as simple as possible, and it's still like a 100-page book.
Wow. So that's a lot going on there, a lot going on. So what type of training goes into becoming a bomb tech? I mean, what type of schooling How long did it take? And I'm pretty sure, I guess it's always ongoing. It's because of things and unfortunately bad folks, I can't say terrorists, but bad people doing different things. So I guess it's always organic in the sense of it's always something that you're learning different, you know,
True.
each week,
True.
each month, each year.
Yeah, and you have two main schools in the United States. Now, countries vary, but if you're not in the military, bomb squads vary around the United States. The majority tend to be in police departments or state police, but in a lot of states, they're actually in the fire department. In a lot of cities, they're in the fire department. Also, in some states, Rhode Island would be a good example. And Massachusetts, though they're actually state troopers, the bomb squad, but they command structure-wise, they fall under the fire marshal's office. So you have some oddballs out there, but most of them, and they all have law enforcement powers because they're going to be involved in investigations and such, of course. But that schooling starts with they have to be selected within their agency and everything. But then it's a 6-week course down in Huntsville, Georgia, run by the FBI, and it's called HDS, the Hazardous Devices School.
Okay.
And then it's an excellent course. And then after that, every 3 years they have to go back for a refresher. Now the refresher is they're tested the day they arrive. They take, and it's a difficult test. It's not a softball. And if they don't pass the test, they're gone. And so they don't want to train the folks who will continue wasting assets training people who aren't keeping up on their own, because they're supposed to be attending, a minimum of so many hours of training per month and other things to keep them up to speed. So if they're not doing that, they're out of the program rather quickly. And they have all kinds of schools that they can continue going to. Most of them tend to be about 1 week. Some are federally funded, some are not. It all just depends. But the military, on the other hand, takes a different perspective. There, it's an 8-month school, and you're in study hall until 5 nights a week. You're in study hall. It's available to you whether you're going or not. It's up to you. But if you want to get through the school, you're going, because everything's classified. So you can't bring anything back and study in your room or any of that. You literally go in, you punch in and out of study hall like you're punching in and out of work at a factory. And then that way, if you start struggling or failing tests, they can see exactly what your percentage of time that you're using of the study hall. In essence, they can determine if you really want to be there or not, and if you're fixable. But after that 8 months, you graduate with a basic badge, and then they have a basic, senior, and master badges, which are earned over time. But the schools, you're doing everything from advanced nuclear weapons schools to dynamic entry, which is breaching, but more of the holes through walls. You're trying to get it with the least amount of explosives possible, because you don't want to kill the hostage. But you're also doing, so in the Marine Corps, it's called dynamic entry versus breaching. And it's using shotgun, mechanical, as well as explosive. But there is just a huge amount of schools available to you. And then there are special teams you can apply for, and if you get picked up on those teams, you'll go to other very specific courses, just kind of depending upon where you're at. Things that are mission, associated with the mission of that particular team. And every service goes to the same school. After school, each service kind of does their own things. For example, the Navy does everything underwater. So before they even get to EOD school, they already have to go to dive school. So the Navy uses that as a vetting process for EOD school. And the Air Force does all the missile silos and that type of stuff. The Army focuses heavily on chemical weapons. So every service has their niche. The Marine Corps' big thing is unearthing and exploitation. In essence, you're disassembling. You get your hands on foreign ordnance and disassemble it for intelligence purposes in order to write publications on it. So that way you know how to render it safe. You know how to deal with it if you ever encounter it in a combat zone. You know what it is, how it works, and what you can and can't do with it.
Wow. Okay, let me ask you another question here on now. If someone listening to this, obviously you're saying military, police. Are there any opportunities for the, I guess, civilian to become a bomb tech, or is that something strictly dealing with military and police?
Yeah, because within the police departments, the whole whether you're a police or fireman or regardless of what your background is, the whole hazardous device school. And the reason I know a bit about that is I attended the hazardous devices school as well while I was still in the Marine Corps. But you don't then do the pause comitatus, which is the rule on limiting the military's uh, what the military can do off base. We fought a revolution about that, so Americans, we take that pretty seriously. So pause comitatus greatly restricts the military's ability to get involved in law enforcement related activities in the United States. So when I attended that school, I could not attend as a student, but rather as a monitor. So I was an official monitor, and it was like a courtesy that the FBI will allow the military in very small numbers. In essence, they'll let you have a seat in the back of the class, kind of thing. But you get to participate in everything, and that's why I'm familiar with the course. It's an excellent course, very well run. And but being it's run by the FBI, if you're a you're not affiliated with law enforcement or anything, and you say, well, I want to go to be on a bomb squad, and I want to be a bomb tech, they'll say, why? You're not going to have the tools and equipment that are required. Before an agency can send the bomb techs, there's a whole program. They have to have certain amount of equipment, certain types of equipment, robots, bomb suits, some of the tools that are power tools, explosively or energetic actuated tools. So if they don't have that, the FBI won't even start sending their folks from their agency to HDS until they have all that stuff. So it's kind of impossible. However, folks who want to get involved in explosives work certainly can, because every state has commercial blasters, working in quarries and mines, and and they do a lot of very good work. And that's where you see a lot of folks who implode buildings and that.
Okay.
That's all explosives. A lot of chemistry, a lot of engineering, a lot of physics. Of course, you have to kind of know what effect you're trying to get and how to go from point A to point B with the least amount of explosives possible, because you don't want to throw frag and rocks and chunks of building any further than you absolutely have to, because insurance and everything else is involved. But every state runs their own program. So I'm also in Oklahoma State. I'm a certified blaster in the state of Oklahoma as well. So every 2 years I have to go back for a whole refresher course, and I have to get tested, and that's actually a very difficult test, especially when I don't do a lot of mining operations, and a lot of it has to do with the math for underground, subsurface explosions and that. So I have to do a bit of studying, because all the stuff we do is surface blasting.
Oh, would you mind sharing some of your assignments that you've been able to work since you've been doing the EOD?
What's that now?
I said, would you mind sharing some of your assignments, some of the things that you have done, where you worked at, because currently where you're working? Give us a little history on that. I mean, you started in the Marine Corps, and from the Marines, you kind of did what?
Yeah, in the Marine Corps, I did the first Gulf War in Haiti in '94, and that was all EOD related stuff. I did a lot of stuff in the United States and traveling as well. But after retiring, then that's when you and I met in 2003 is when I hired with the Federal Air Marshal Service, and I wanted to get into law enforcement. That's my master's in forensics. I always wanted to do law enforcement related investigative work, and ended up as working with you in Philadelphia, and that was just that was great. I absolutely loved it there. Big mistake I made was I took a promotion as the division technology officer and moved to D.C. And man, that's just such a grind. I'll never. Anybody who can work in D.C. long term and do that commute, man, my hat's off to you. I just can't do it. And so after that, I I wanted to go back to contracting, and I had a lot of EOD in Afghanistan and Iraq actually per capita, because the number of people in those fields are very small, but it's in the military, whatever your job is called an MOS, your military occupational specialty. And of all the MOSs in the military for all 4 branches of service, EOD actually has the highest casualty rate. So I really wanted to try to get back into, giving back a bit there. So I deployed as a contractor to Afghanistan 3 times. I did worked in the forensic labs, which you might find this funny. This is what happens when bomb techs get to name stuff. So the IED forensic labs are called the Combined Explosives Exploitation Cells, CEXC. So the initials CEXC are pronounced sexy. So you could be foreign ordnance exploitation, which is foxy. So you can be foxy, sexy, or if you're lucky, you can be both. But it's I did a couple of tours there, and then I was the in-country project manager for the counter-ID mobile training teams, and we had guys just traveling all around the country all the time. I had 28 guys, and we were teamed with 25 military under Task Force Paladin. So we'd normally team up a contractor and military, and they were all from various fields, depending upon who we were training, whether it's combat engineers, infantry, EOD, whoever. And that was a very good tour. I did that for 9 months, and then at Iraq, I did a State Department tour as an EOD team lead. So I was back in a bomb suit, which actually is ironic because I never wore a bomb suit while I was in the Marine Corps because we didn't have them.
Wow.
And then they got them after right about 2 years before I retired is when we started getting bomb suits. But I was the officer running the show. I'm not getting a bomb suit. So I mean, I would have. You got a lot going on, but we didn't have a lot going on. I didn't see any need. I hadn't worn one my whole career. What the hell am I going to start wearing one now for? But when I was in Iraq, I was wearing it, of course, and then I started getting involved with some other State Department teaching, and was able to go to Jordan and Kenya and Tanzania, and just really trying to enjoy life, while teaching it. But one of the things I did, which we were talking about, before the holidays, a month or so ago, we were talking about something, and I told you about Cambodia, and I was training demining there with a good friend of mine, another retired Marine, EOD tech, by the name of Mark Lasley, great guy, and we were teaching this course, and I got sick. That was that funny story I was telling you about.
Share the story with the Smoke World crew.
Oh, well, we'll probably get a kick out of it. So if everyone's got a drink and a stogie, they'll you might find this one funny. So so I was in Cambodia, and I've been there, I don't know, 9-10 times now, and at that time I was going to be there for probably about 5 or 6 months teaching these courses with Mark, and we were working with the Cambodian Mine Action Center, which is all the folks in Cambodia running demining throughout the country, and we were training them. So Cambodians have a lot of holidays. So they had a holiday, so we had no classes for 4 or 5 days. So I went up to Siem Reap. Well, Siem Reap is it looks like the Mayan ruins down in South America. That's what Siem Reap. And anybody, if you have an opportunity to travel to Cambodia, Google Siem Reap, SEIM REAP, and just look at the Angkor Wat is what the area is called. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's just absolutely breathtaking, and it's massive. But that's where the Khmer Rouge had their final stronghold for about 15 years during the Civil War, where the communists, in essence, got kicked out. And they mined every square inch of that area. So as they're demining these areas, they're able to open more of them up to tourism. And so I went up to see that, and I met a British EOD tech that I worked with this company, Golden West, and he's a funny guy, but he insisted on going to eat at a Mexican restaurant. Mexican restaurant in Cambodia.
Wah,
Not
wah.
a good idea.
Yeah, maybe not.
So we go there, and you're not going to eat any freshly cut, like vegetable, like salsa type stuff, because you don't know where they dice that up. Probably on the same block they chop raw chicken. So you have to be careful. So you get something where you can see the food. You don't get stuff like rolled up in a burrito.
Right.
You get something that's in there. God knows it's in there.
Experience is a great teacher.
Exactly. Well, I take a little salsa off the meat and I eat it. Well, I still think that's what bit me. So next day, I obviously have food poisoning. I was like, shit, So I only got to really see what I wanted to look at for about a day and a half, and then it hit me hard, and I just kept saying, well, it'll pass. I'll be sick as hell for a day or two, and then I'll be fine. But it wouldn't stop. So then I just said, man, I gotta so I get a driver, and me and this other guy drive all the way back to Phnom Penh. Now and by now I'm in pain. I mean, I'm having a lot of pain in my stomach, and we had to drive like 6 hours in a SUV with no springs,
Wow.
completely shut, on not good roads at all. And I get all the way back to Phnom Penh, and one of the guys from Golden West like, hey, Tom, let me bring you over to the hospital. I said, no, man, all I have to do is, you got any medical folks on here? I said, all I need is a good hot shower. I just got to take a good shit, and I'll be fine. Well, it turns out that's a symptom of something when you really feel like got to take a dump and you can't. So I end up trying to get some rest. Can't. About 3 a.m, I texted him and said, hey, when you get up, and you get this text, just stop over and get me. I should get to the hospital. So like 4:30 in the morning, he's at my door. He's like, I saw your text. I said, oh, dude, I didn't want to wake you up. So he brings me over there, and it turns out I have food poisoning, and I also have an appendix my appendix is screwed, and I had dysentery, a severe dysentery. So, but by now I'm pretty damn sick. So now the medical evacuation plan was to get to an American quality hospital. So in Thailand, the United States went over and set up this hospital, and we set up this whole training program, and even the VA, like the Veterans Administration, if you're a retired vet, because my buddy Mark had his knee replacement done in Thailand, and he said that they did a great job. He's super happy. He went back and had the second one done there.
Okay, interesting.
And, so it's a good quality hospital. So that was the medevac plan. Well, it turns out now the Thais are apparently trying to help the Cambodians do the same thing, but it was just starting. Because this was a few years ago. This was in 2014. So I get told, hey, and that's at that time they were having some unrest in Thailand. There were a lot of demonstrations. There had been a military coup. So he comes in, and my buddy says, so now you got to remember, Cambodia has no requirement of care in a hospital. So if you don't have insurance or cash, they'll wheel you out and throw you right out of a wheelchair.
Oh, interesting. So, it's like United States. No.
No requirement of care. They don't have to give you a Band-Aid or nothing. So I'm standing there, but because we have insurance, I have the doctor, who doesn't speak English, by the way. The doctor spoke 5 languages. He was French trained, but English wasn't one of them. So he probably knew a couple hundred words. So I have the guy who did the ultrasound. I think he was a doctor too, but he didn't speak English, so I couldn't ask. There's the surgeon who ended up doing the surgery, and some other guy, I can't remember. I was so damn sick, I really didn't care. And my buddy comes back in. He goes, Tom, I can have you on an operating table in Bangkok in 12 hours. And I said, all right, that's cool. And because they had flown me there and doctor on the plane, all 9 years. Okay, great. And the doctor says, 2. So I said, 2 what? And he points at the clock, and he holds his hands out in front of him, and he goes, boom. And I was like, shit. So my buddy goes, hey, Tom, it's your body, man. It's your choice. I said, well, if my appendix is going to blow up in 2 hours, I don't think 12 hours to get the surgery is going to cut it. So I guess I'll have surgery here. So I said that, and everybody just turned and walked away. So I was like, oh, great. I mean, I'm all clammy and sweaty, and, I just feel like shit. So this nurse goes walking by like a minute later, and I just said, hey, can I, like, wash up? And she says, no. So I said, why? And then she does, like, a scissor with her hand, like scissor on my side.
Right.
So, like, okay, I'm having surgery. So I said, when? And she looks at the clock. Now, but by now, I think it was like, for argument's sake, about 8:45. And she looks at the clock and she thinks for a second. So, she's translating in her head. And she looks at me and she says, 9. And I said, 9? I'm having surgery in 15 minutes? And she just looks at me, shrugs, and walks away. I was like, oh, this is freaking great. So in once a guy with a wheelchair. And, like, in Afghanistan, I should add this, too, is, like, we tended to call the Afghans when you got the folks who don't bathe much, and you can tell, like, when it's been a few months, and you call them stinkies because you can, like, smell them at 20 feet away. So I'm sitting there, and I just said to myself, freaking stinky just walked in the room. And I look over my shoulder, and there's this, like, young kid with a wheelchair, and he's waving at me. And the kid's all dressed nice in a uniform. But, oh, my God, does this kid stink? And he's pointing at the wheelchair, waving at me with a big smile. So I said, oh, shit, my stinky ride has arrived. So I hop in the stinky chair, and this kid wheels me in, and I don't really remember what happened for a little bit, but I remember I'm now in an apron, and I'm sitting in a hallway, and there's a gurney in front of me, and this nurse comes up and with hand and arm signals instructs me to stand up and bend over and sticks a friggin' shot of morphine in my ass. And this was like surgery in the United States circa 1972. So I sit back down, and right as I sit down, she points at the gurney, and boom, the morphine hits me, right? And I just said, yeah, that wasn't happening before I was stoned, but Jesus, it sure as hell isn't happening now, So she ends up having to get 2 guys, because I was so weak, man. I was really, really sick. So it took like 2 guys to get me up on this gurney. So now they wheel me into surgery, and the surgery was huge. It was like a big room. It was like a big master bedroom size, and this was a surgery room. So I was like, holy smokes, man, this place is huge. There's all these people going around, and there's, they're doing stuff here and there, and I start looking at the ceiling because I'm laying flat on my back with my arms stretched out like I'm getting crucified. And I start going, wow, man, the sheetrock in here looks like shit. These guys can't even hang sheetrock. And I don't like rationalizing with myself. But then again, the doctor probably didn't do the sheetrock, so yeah, maybe he's okay. Sheetrock guy says that. And as I'm running like these bizarre thoughts through my head, wondering if I'm going to die or not, because I was pretty certain by this time I was toast. And all of a sudden, this huge, like, head comes in from the top. So the guy just had a head and shoulders. He had no neck. It was like his shoulders connected at his ears, and just a big brick of a guy. And he sticks his head over. So he's upside down. Like he comes in from the top, and he's looking at me upside down. He says, Schmicky, or something to that effect. Something that began with a sis sound, and then no word I've ever heard in my life. To which I said, what? And the guy gets all pissed off, and he starts doing the American thing. Now he's yelling at me, Schmicky, Schmicky, Schmicky. I said, dude, I got no idea how you said it. So he goes over and he starts, dicking around with these big canisters and that. I said, I'm trying to focus. I'm like stoned at a bejesus. And I said, well, I got an IV in that arm. He's got a bunch of cans over there. He might be the anesthesiologist. So I said, hey, dude, you asking if I'm sleepy? And I kind of like put my hand by my eyes, like, hand and arm signals for looking tired.
Right.
And he looks at me like I'm a jerk, and I said, dude, that isn't even close to what you're saying. So then he turns around, he does something. He looks back at me, he goes, Smicky? And I said, no, I guess not, if that means sleepy. No, I'm not. So he turns around, he does something, and then he looks back at me, he goes, Smicky? And I said, no, And then I said, wait a second, this guy's winging it. I'm getting anesthesiology. This anesthesiologist is just winging it, man. I said, holy shit, I don't remember stepping on a scale. Like, nobody weighed me, you know? And this guy's like, just got to keep cranking the knob until I'm knocked out. So I was like, hey, and right as I'm thinking this, I get that tingle in my arm. And if you ever had surgery and you've been put under, you know, you get that tingle in your arm. You got about 2-3 seconds, and you're out.
You're done.
And as soon as I felt that in my arm, I just said, well, it's too late now. So I literally just laid my head back and I looked straight ahead. And right as I did that, a friggin' fly about the size of a small bumblebee went right past my nose. And as soon as I saw that, I literally, the last thought that went through my mind was, I'm fucking dead. And I woke up in ICU.
Oh,
so,
man. Hell of a story there, brother. That's a hell of a story.
Well, I had no caffeine for days. For like 3-4 days, I had no caffeine. So my heart rate was like 38, 39. I've got, I guess, a good heart. You know, I'm not going to die of a heart attack anytime soon. But, usually I'm caffeined up all the time, as you very well know.
Yeah.
And, with no caffeine and hitting a 38, 39, and these guys thought I was going to croak. So everywhere I went, they had an EKG machine, and they kept giving me EKGs like every 15 minutes. So I wake up and I'm looking around. I'm like, oh man! It turns out I'm in an ICU, and there's an EKG machine there with about 3 miles of paper, because they had the ones that just scrolled out like a big wheel.
Like going back in time.
Like a whole big pile of paper on the ground where they've been like, I think they were just running the thing nonstop. They thought I was going to croak on them. Now, check this out. I ended up in the hospital for 9 days, private room, right? And take a guess at how much that surgery cost. In 2014, it was an emergency room visit, an emergency appendectomy, and treatment for that, food poisoning, and the other for dysentery, and then 9 days in a private room in a hospital. Take a guess.
In the States, you're looking at, I'm saying, easily over $100,000 for surgery.
Easy.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
It cost $9,000.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I was like, holy shit, man.
Oh, you got the hell of a discount.
I had to go sit in a hotel for a couple of weeks, which was good, because by now, right now, I'm sitting here talking to you, I go about 180. When I first, I was in better shape then, so I was probably like 175. After 2 weeks in the hospital, and then the doctor cleared me to fly home, I flew back home, and when I went to see my family doctor, to check everything out, it turned out that dysentery I had forms lesions on your brain and your liver, and so he's like, oh yeah, I got to do a lot of liver tests on you. So what about my brain? He goes, oh no, we wouldn't be having this conversation if you got those lesions. I'm like, oh great.
Interesting.
And dude, I at that time, this is after like 3 weeks of fattening up, I weighed 158. And that was it. So I was probably down to like 140 pounds, man. That's how fast and hard, man, that hit me.
Oh wow! At least I'm happy. We're happy you're here, brother. We're happy you made it through that. We're definitely happy we made it through that. I'm asking a scenario where, the listening audience listening, they don't know anything about bombs except what we see in TVs and the movies. You see these pipe bombs, and you see these bombs with the cell phone. Now, pipe bombs. Speaking of pipe bombs, this last week the Capitol was overrun by domestic terrorists. And they found some pipe bombs. What type of damage could those pipe bombs do?
Well, I'll tell you, those things they either look like hoaxes or horribly amateurish, but because they had old clockwork timers and the old like egg timers, and but here's the thing, it depends what's in it. So if you have a low explosive like black powder, what really happens then is, when you have a pipe bomb and say it's sealed completely, let's just, just to keep a simple example, there's no fuse sticking out of it. Everything is inside of it, so it's completely encased. And let's say they even glued the threads so that there's no way the end cap would pop off or anything. So what's going to happen is when black powder and other low explosives similar to that, when they burn, they generate pressure but slowly. So as the pressure builds, I mean, you just see an explosion, boom, but from a chemical perspective, it's moving very slow for an energetic reaction. So what happens is the pressure builds up, and the next time you go to the Lowe's, you look at a pipe, like a regular plumbing type metal pipe, you'll see there's a seam on it. And what happens is the pressure builds up until the seam fails, so it blows open like a big fillet, and you end up getting 2 or 3 pieces of frag out of the whole body, or the end caps punch out, like right where the pipe goes in. Where it threads down will stay on the pipe, and the end just punches out. And those pieces will fly really fast and really far. If they hit you, you're done. But there's only a couple of pieces coming off, so it's really more like a boiler explosion versus, a detonation. Where a detonation, on the other hand, now you have to have a high explosive. It's moving in excess of speed of sound in that material. So now you're going from, say, 3,000 feet per second to 25,000 feet per second. So you're talking a vast difference in speed. And now what happens is when you have a high explosive go, the energy is moving so fast and it's so strong that the case is trying to stretch and, in essence, get out of the way as fast as it can, but it can't. And it fragments into very, very small pieces. And those are very, very jagged around the edges. And when they fly off, that frag is going to be moving at 8,000, 9,000 feet per second for the first foot or two. It'll decelerate after that. But that's where you just get a tremendous amount of frag, because now you have hundreds or thousands of small, tiny pieces and moving, 3-4 times the speed of a rifle bullet. And then they're spinning, like little buzzsaws. So that's why when they hit you, they do tremendous tissue damage or bone damage as well. So it really depends what's in them. But you can make a pipe bomb, is no joke. I mean, it can be very dangerous and very effective depending upon what the knowledge of the person who's putting it together is.
And I heard you mentioned high explosive opposed to a low explosive. Now, the listener audience may not know the difference between a high explosive.
Well, and that's like a low explosive would be like your black powder and other just. And what it means is that the material is burning fast, mind you. I mean, it's exploding. Okay, it's going to explode, but it's not going to detonate. Now, I'll explain exactly what a detonation is, so it makes sense. But black powder can explode. Smokeless powder, it depends how it's initiated, it depends which smokeless you have as well. But it'll explode, it'll burn. Okay, but a high explosive, now you have a material that has the ability to start a self-propagating or self-sustaining shock front that'll move through the material in excess of the speed of sound. So if you ever seen like a Hollywood shot, and you see when there's the explosion and you see that rolling fireball and it kind of rolls up into the sky, and that fireball, that's a low explosive, or it's more of an incendiary event. But that's a good example because it shows that that's an inefficient use of that energy, because it's very fuel heavy, hence the fire, and it doesn't have enough oxygen in the mixture to sustain that reaction. So it's reaching out for the oxygen. That's why the fire keeps kind of like billowing out, like it almost looks like a ball, and then another ball comes out and another ball, because it's reaching out for the oxygen to continue the reaction. Where a high explosive has the fuel, the oxygen, and everything is in-house. So as soon as that shock wave starts to propagate through the material, it just takes off. And that's where you start to see, like TNT PETN, RDX. You have TNT. You have what's called the velocity of detonation, how fast that propagation wave moves through, 22,000 feet per second. But PETN, you're looking like 28,000 feet per second. It gets real fast, where black powder is giving you, say, 3,000 feet per second. So it's so high explosives are much. It's a different league, so to speak.
Gotcha. Now, what do you think? Tap your memory a little bit, maybe not. What's one of the most, say, dangerous incidents that you may remember that you had to work on that stands out to you?
A lot of inerting ops, I guess. Those are the ones where Marines tend to get hurt the most. I've only done a few IEDs, and in all honesty, they were not bad. Actually, I rendered one safe on the front step of the Sexy Lab in Afghanistan. Somebody dropped it off as evidence, but it was completely intact. I had like 12 pounds of explosives and a whole remote, what was called a remote fob trigger, or RFT, and a fusing system on it. I looked at it and I was like, what the hell? Where's the brain? I'm looking for crimped wires, and I was like, what the hell? This thing isn't disconnected. So I took my Leatherman out and I friggin' rendered it safe, and then I called the folks who had turned it in, and so that doesn't happen again. And that didn't happen again after that. So somebody got their ass chewed seriously, which rightfully so. They needed to have it chewed. But I don't know. There's I think the ones that tend to bite you are the ones that you're not expecting. So the ones that you're really iffy about, you're so, it's kind of hard to say, really. I've had an awful lot of frag fly over my head and an awful lot hit around me. I've had quite a few times where I just assumed I was dead, but I lucked out.
Oh,
I guess
definitely.
That's what to put it. But you have to remember, though, that while I was in the Marine Corps, we were literally on the range, all the time. I mean, like, many times we went out to do range sweeps, and we were out there for a month, and the submunition sweeps are probably the most dangerous. There were two friends of mine were killed in the 90s, working on submunitions, and we ended up changing because we were hand safing this one particular kind at the time, and they don't hand safe them anymore because of that. And but it's submunitions are probably the worst because they're in essence designed to never be taken apart and not to be removed. They're made to either be dropped on the battlefield and function, or a time delay and function, or an anti-disturbance and then function, or just self-destruct if nobody gets them by a certain time, and for some reason they didn't blow up, and you're out. And when you're working in areas like that, the area is absolutely saturated. So in one day, you're destroying between 2,500 and 3,500 of those a day, and that's with maybe 6 techs, 7 techs out there working. So it's but you stop working by, say, 2 in the afternoon, because honestly it's very mentally taxing because you're so focused at such a high level, like mentally concentrating while you're working, that by 2 in the afternoon you're smoked. I mean, you're just mentally smoked.
Oh, wow. Now we're going to move to a different direction, and you tell me you're working on a book. Talk to me about this book you're working on. What you got? Talk to us.
Well, actually, it's I got a couple, but the one that's out is the second edition. It's titled Practical Military Ordnance Identification, but it's through anybody who's interested in the law enforcement type thing. It's part of CRC Press has a practical forensic investigation series. So it's called The Practical Aspects of Criminal and Forensic Investigations. And it was started with the Practical Homicide book written by Vern Gabrath. He was the chief of detectives from NYPD when he retired, but he had worked his way up through the homicide side of the house. And then his book was so successful, CRC Press said, hey, we want to make a series out of it, and Vern would then find the authors to write on their specific disciplines. Well, I had met him at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, just at conferences and that, and just hit it off. He's a great guy. He's a real mentor kind of guy, and he'll sit and talk to anybody about like anything. If you want to learn, he's all about it. So we just really hit it off. And he asked me, he said, hey, now all of the bomb techs in New York City with NYPD, they're all detectives. The bomb squad, they're all detectives in that squad. So he said, hey, I remember the techs, when he was with NYPD, having a lot of problems with and a lot of recoveries of ordnance, on calls. He said, would you be interested in writing a book on ordnance, but with a, forensic perspective in that? And I said, at first I thought he was, nuts, so just being nice. And I said, no, it wouldn't work. So then we discussed it, and I said, I think that's a good idea. So I did, and that book came out in 2014. But then, you learn a lot when you do something like that. So the second edition came out last year, and I added a chapter on pre-1900 ordnance. So I went heavily into low explosives, black powder, gun cotton, a lot of things used in the 1800s and earlier than that, and which is still used today. But I tried to get how the developments at that time led to what we have now, and more from a recognition perspective, so that way you can see what you've got and ascertain the threat. So, but it's got a pull-out chart in the back covering all the ordnance categories and groups, and that's about 7-page pull-out. And then I added a lot of x-rays too, because the bomb techs have x-ray in the United States. But this isn't specifically for bomb techs. This is anything from park rangers to anybody who may encounter ordnance, UXO techs, anybody working on military bases, and then anybody who's interested in military collecting, because I have, I think it's 135 illustrations or figures, pictures and that.
Okay.
But in many cases, to maximize that, I would have, say, 6 grenades or a half a dozen fuses, and I would put them into one picture. That way it was only one figure, because that way I could technically keep the number of figures down, but I was providing more pictures of stuff. Gotcha. And actually, a lot of the explosives I laid out, what's called like a whole Cheddite class of explosives that came out during World War I, that is really a lot of those same mixtures is what you're seeing in ISIS-made munitions and a lot of the terrorist-related explosives now. Because it was, at that World War I, they were just trying to pack anything in a shell that would go boom. And now a lot of that stuff is cheap, relatively easy to make, and the chemicals to make it are usually readily available, oftentimes right at Lowe's, or you can make an awful lot of stuff just with over-the-counter materials.
So where can we find these books?
If you go to CRC Press, but you can also hit Amazon. And to make sure you get the second edition on the front cover, it has the background picture is a bunch of landmines, and that was in Tanzania after the Gongalama Boto ammo dump. I worked as an advisor there for a couple of months with cleaning up this ammo dump. That was really a horrible, horrible incident. But then there's 4 grenades x-rayed, and it's a Japanese, a Yugoslavian, an American Vietnam vintage, and a Belgian grenades, and they're all x-rayed, so you can kind of see, what they look like inside. But it also was to drive home the point that there are x-rays also covered throughout the book with different things, so you can get an idea what the insides look like. And but it gets into the safety precautions, and the energetics chapter is all about explosives, white phosphorus mixtures, and there's a whole chapter on chemical ordnance. So how the types of chemicals that are used, how they affect the human body, how they're classified, who uses them, how to identify those munitions, the threats they pose. Because believe it or not, they show up. And we dumped a lot of chemical ordnance into the ocean. And every now and then it shows up on beaches. However, very commonly, it's drug up by folks who are out clamming or oystering in deeper waters.
Interesting.
And they actually pull them up a lot. And there's been actually quite a few incidents in the United States of folks getting injured really badly with World War I chemical ordnance. And the thing is, in that part of the ocean, Kev, the munitions will sink. They thought they would sit proud, meaning they would just sit right on the bottom and just deteriorate. Many of them did, and that's good. But a lot of them sunk down into the sand between 1 to 3 feet. And in that part of the Atlantic, it's a very sandy bottom, but it also has a lot of clay in it. So as it would sink down in the sand, the clay clings to the steel. Dude, these things were dumped in there in 1919, over 100 years ago. And when they're coming up, they look like they were thrown in there a month ago. I mean, the painting on them, it's like brand new. I'm just amazed. A lot of the stuff deteriorated and is gone. But some of it, if it just sat in high clay areas, it just keeps the oxygen away from it. And even in the salt water, it's just not deteriorating.
Oh, interesting. All right, as we wrap it up, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience? Any way to get in contact with you? Do you have any social media, email? If somebody's interested, maybe talking to you, having you come out as a guest or an instructor?
Oh, yeah, dude, that'd be awesome. Yeah, so I got, let me give you 2 emails, because I got my personal email, but now I teach at Oklahoma State, as I mentioned earlier, and if any of your listeners are interested in pursuing a master's in forensics, I teach in what's called the AEFTI, the Arson, Explosives, Firearms, and Tool Marks Investigation Program. But then there's also like a general forensics, but we now have master's and PhD programs. And I can send them info on whatever program they might be interested, because they do have all of the basics, all of the fundamental chemistry, toxicology, DNA. We have all those programs as well. But that would be Tom dot and then my last name, Gersbeck. It's Gers Beck, BECK, at okstate.edu. And that OK State is just one word. Then my personal email, though, is Tom, the number's 212021 at outlook.com. And, I'm definitely, any of your listeners, if they have questions or, they're looking to get into a forensic type program, tell them to contact me. I'll be more than glad to. If I know the answer to the question, I'll certainly provide it. If I don't, I'll get them to the person who can answer that question, no doubt.
Oh, definitely, bro. Well, look, I appreciate you being a guest on Smoke World. Appreciate taking the time out to explain everything to everyone. It's a very interesting subject based on what's going on today. Again, I'd love to talk to you in the future if things jump off, if we can maybe reach out to you and say, hey, Tom, what's going on? So hopefully you will be willing to share some of your knowledge with the Smoke World. And again, Black, I appreciate you, man. I just want you to be safe. And I thank you for being a guest.
I very much appreciate, very much like to do that, Kevin. I very much appreciate the opportunity to get on your program, man. I really do appreciate it.
All right, so why don't you take care of yourself and stay safe, and we'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you soon. Actually, I'm going to text you. You got to send me contact info for your partner, man.
Yes, sir. I definitely will, brother.
Hey, you have a great day, man.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, man. Take care of yourself. Well, folks, there you have it. Another episode of Smoke World in the books. Wanted to thank Tom Gersbeck, EOD, Bomb Tech, the man who goes in when everybody runs out. Again, folks, you can follow me on Instagram at SmokeWorld50. Send those emails into SmokeWorld50@gmail.com. Look, folks, don't forget to subscribe. Appreciate you listening. I will check you out on the other side. Peace.